while we get Alison back. And so we're going to reverse the order till we get Alison. Lawrence, are you available and ready to go?
I'm ready to go, assuming you can hear me.
I can hear you, so this is perfect. So Lawrence, thank you so much. So
my pleasure. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Okay, I'm assuming I'm all up and you can all see my slides. Hit my timer because it's very tight. Trying to teach anyone to be a self-advocate in 10 minutes is a bit of a challenge, but we'll try our best today. So firstly, before I get into maybe some of the hows, some of my experience so people understand where I'm coming from, I've done this twice as a parent. Most of the experience I'll refer to today is my youngest boy, Jake, who's now 23 and graduated as a fully fledged chef from George Brown. So his LD was diagnosed in grade 3 and 4. We struggled through those transition years through high school and then had to hand over the baton as he went along the road. So I'm going to, where I can, draw on my own experience. So where do you start in building a self-advocate? The first thing to do is very clearly make sure your child understands their learning disability or their learning difference. If they've not got a diagnosed LD, maybe they've got some other issue that's impacting their learning. They need to understand it. And it's very important you don't sugarcoat it. Let's be direct and honest. Where does it impact their learning? What accommodations do they need to actually succeed in learning? And how's it going to impact them in the classroom? And obviously then when you get into further education, you've got a slightly different environment, so you're going to need to rethink that as you go along, and I'll talk to some of that. The image at the bottom, to most people, you'd see that 4/4 of an apple equals an apple. But for some of our kids, that's not what they see there. They see a cut apple, an equal sign, and a full apple, and the relationship doesn't make any sense to them because they have spatial issues. So the first part of any self-advocacy is, what do I need? What am I asking for in order to allow me to learn? The second part of it in the early years is to be the role model. It's very easy in advocacy issues to become, let's say, combative along the way. Certain teachers who maybe aren't responding, or at least your hearing aren't responding, because often what we hear from our kids when they come home at night might not be exactly the full story. So early on, you need to model it. You need to be part of a team approach with the school and the teachers. You need to really model, I know it's a cliche, but model that win-win, so that they'll see that advocacy is, you know, to use a very old expression, you'll get more with honey than you do with vinegar. So teaching them to build relationships that support their advocacy, they will see it from you first. So the other part of that is, as well as being positive of attitude, find the places of success. With Jake, for me, it was always sports. He was a rep soccer player, always excelled on the field, helped him to find something where he had success, which is a great balance if you're, you know, struggling in certain areas at school. With Jake, by the way, it was written expression that was his issue. So that's, every time he sat down to write an essay, it was a struggle. So you have to give them things that will show them the other side of that coin. Resilience is the key word. You've heard it in the speaker that was just ahead of me from the Gap Year Association. It's kind of the buzzword right now, but it is very important. Like, kids have to learn to take a knock and be able to dust themselves down and get back up, because our kids, because they learn differently, will always be fighting that. So the next step in self-advocacy and helping in that handover, giving the torch to the child, is to build a process. So initially this will be you, and again, exactly as you heard in the preceding presentation, you're looking to hand this to them and help them to build a process as well. So research, find out what's available, what tools are out there, whether it's apps, whether it's tuition and out of school things. Find out what you need in order to help them become successful in their learning. Once you've got the resources, what you mustn't do is plug and play. Again, to use that expression, there's an app for everything. There is, but they don't always fit best for your child. My example of that is, at the time when Jake was diagnosed, they kind of threw Dragon Naturally Speaking at all kids that had a similar diagnosis to Jake. and it was just talk to this, it will type for you, it will get around your issue. The software does do all of those things. However, unfortunately for Jake, he never really found it effective. We actually went out eventually with him. By the way, we got around that with just actually building excellent keyboarding skills. So he worked around his issue with a different method than was the one that was prescribed, and we always kept going back to it. When you talk higher education, as the image here shows you, now we're talking about a whole bunch of different issues. We are not dealing just with the academic now. For the first time, maybe for a lot of these young adults, now they have all sorts of other issues to deal with. Financially, moving maybe to a new area, you know, if you're in Toronto and they've decided to go to Queens, or, you know, they're out of your environment for the first time. So they're learning a whole bunch of things. So that's why it's so important that they can understand their own coping mechanisms and what they need from the university or college that they're at. So the reality is, get to that accessibility office early, help them find it. If they're reticent at that point, help them to get past that and connect with those offices, because one of the things they're probably used to at school, through a resource room at high school, is sort of the process is there from and spoon-fed. It becomes different when they're out of the environment and they're into further education. Yes, the supports are there, but there's an expectation that you're going to go and ask for them. That's going to be scary as a parent. But again, you've got to resist. I love the bulldozer analogy. I'm going to steal that for a future presentation. But that's the reality. You're going to have to resist that. I've got a friend of mine right now who a number of times wanted to get in the car, drive from Oakville to Brock to help his son out. You've got to kind of try and resist that as much as you can and help them, talk to them, but make them go and find the resources they need. So how do we know whether we're actually building an advocate? Firstly, their self-esteem should improve. Pretty obvious, but for Jake, when he was diagnosed, one of the absolute critical moments when we came out from the school psychologist's office was when he turned around to me and said, "Dad, I'm glad I've got something because I just thought I was done." So as they become their own self-advocate, understand they can learn and get greater success, their self-esteem will obviously grow. They'll be less frustrated. Hopefully you get less of those, "Oh, my teacher doesn't understand." And they see that working as a team with the institution is really the best way to get results. You also have to obviously be consistent. The next step is if Lawrence regrets one thing, it's not saying sorry to my child when I messed up. So one thing I would say is, as a parent, it's okay to admit that, you know what, I got that wrong. Jake and I had homework wars for a couple of years when he was going through sort of those mid-school years. And it's a time I look back on with regret, but I didn't really know any better. So be sorry and be kind to yourself. Actually allow things to pass away. And just as you grow, you'll do things differently. We all do. So that's a really quick journey through. But what I want to talk about is a great way to actually build this into a real process. So depending on your child's age, actually go out. I'll come back to the discussion question, but if you see the link there for LD at school, there's a number of things there that are going to help you to decide what you need and what your child needs as you build through. So there's a PDF there which talks about understanding LDs. The York Waterfall chart, which was developed by the York Regional School Board, to give it its full title, talks a lot about learning disabilities and their impact on learning. It's a teacher-driven tool. It's designed to let teachers understand it, but it will certainly help a parent understand how processing works. And there's also a resource there around understanding your LD and the impact it has. The second link, which is probably the most practical tool we've ever come across, actually came out of a teacher, Julia Osborne, who came from the York board as well. Interestingly, we were kind of doing a lot of work with them around self-advocacy, is building a self-advocacy card. So this is an exercise that the student does. And if, for example, your child hates talking to teachers, this is a document where they can put all of their needs down, why they need accommodations, what their strengths are, their learning style, and they can then give it to educators. So it's really more useful in high school. You would hope by the time they go to further education, they have these skills down pat. But that self-advocacy card is a really strong physical thing you can do. So to end with my discussion question, I think it all starts in self-advocacy with, does your child understand their learning needs? So you need to ask them the questions and let them teach you. And in doing so, you will hopefully build that self-advocate. This is a very quick journey. There's lots of tools on our website, but I can see Alison's back. So I'm going to finish, and I think I'm 21 seconds over my time, Alison. So I think that was pretty good.
Lawrence, it's been a true pleasure working with you, and so thank you so much. And in fact, actually, I can see some Q&As, and your association, Learning Disability Association of Ontario, got some shout outs here from a Tracy that you helped a child with homework, and the mother, with homework wars. So thank you. And there's a Katrina that says, it's great to see you. I know earlier on in our conversation too, we had some parents mention the provincial demonstration schools. One parent said that they really, it helped their child as well. And I'm looking for one more resource that was mentioned. And I will find it after. It was Dublin is a private school for children with learning disabilities, and so for her, it was a great experience as well too. So just want to pass along some of those resources that parents are experiencing.
Great. Thanks, Alison.
So thank you, Lawrence. Now we have our next guest. So Alison, I like your name.
Hello.
Alison Parker is back with us again from Queen's University. So Alison.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so glad we got the technology sorted out that I could be here. I am a transition program coordinator at the Regional Assessment and Resource Center at Queen's University. We support students in grades 7 to 12 in preparing for post-secondary school, and specifically supporting students with disabilities as they prepare for that transition. And one of the things I want to talk about today is our Transition Resource Guide, which is a web-based resource to help students and parents plan a transition. Transitions, as we know, they are stressful and they're not easy for anyone. And our guide is a way to help ease that transition for students, parents, and teachers about planning for post-secondary school in Ontario. The transitionresourceguide.ca, it's a bilingual English and French website, and it includes general information such as support services for students, as well as more specific information for students with disabilities, such as how to arrange for academic accommodations or what accessibility options are available in residence and around campus. And I want to highlight a few sections of the website. This is a screenshot of the resources section, and this is where you'll find information that applies to all post-secondary schools across Ontario. Information such as how accommodations are set up at post-secondary, the types of documentation requirements for students with disabilities, and information about financial aid such as OSAP or the bursary for students with disabilities. In the colleges and universities section is where you'll find more specific information for each of the 44 colleges and universities in Ontario. We provide specific information about their accessibility services, as well as contact information for those services, and then other support services such as the counseling center or peer tutoring that are available for all students. We also include information about residence, campus, and even transit accessibility. I want to highlight some of the information you'll find on our website and help paint a picture of what disability and accessibility looks like at post-secondary school. And to begin with, I want to talk about the differences, especially in legislation between secondary and post-secondary school. In elementary and secondary school, it's the Education Act that governs special education. And at post-secondary and in workplaces and government across Ontario, it's the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms and the Accessibility of Ontario's with Disabilities Act, the AODA, that governs that special education. When we look at how these laws are applied to students, at elementary and secondary school, the primary goal is success for all students. So what services need to be in place to ensure students are successful and really ultimately that they'll graduate high school. At post-secondary school, the goal is access for all students. So what services and accommodations need to be in place so that students have access to the learning and access to the assessment, but there's no guarantee that they will be successful. They need to be able to meet the academic criteria on their own. And one way of looking at that is actually in that all students have the right to fail at post-secondary school. Another thing I want to highlight is the shift in responsibility that happens from elementary and secondary over to post-secondary. And when we look at high school, generally we see that parents and teachers are the ones taking the lead role in arranging accommodations and advocating for students. Whereas at post-secondary, it's the students that have to take the lead there. And specifically, the support staff, they want to be hearing from the students when there are any problems or questions and not necessarily from their parents, especially once students turn 18 and there's also confidentiality requirement. In terms of providing accommodations at post-secondary, every school in Ontario will have an accessibility services office. Now they all have different names, either accessibility services or disability center or something like that, but they all provide similar services. And how it works is that students will need to make an appointment for an intake with Accessibility Services Office at their school. And then what will happen is they'll meet with accessibility counselors or advisors to go over their disability documentation, to determine appropriate accommodations and make a plan to see that through. And it's important to note that the secondary school IEP, the individual education plan, that word and that document is an elementary and high school document. So it does not automatically continue at post-secondary school. Students can share their IEP as part of their documentation about their disability, but the college or university will create their own documentation, their own accommodation plan for the student and to share with professors. Additionally, I do want to reiterate that at college and university, it's the student that needs to self-identify and register with accessibility services. That means making the phone call, sending an email to set up that first appointment. Otherwise, there's no documentation that automatically moves from high school to college, university. They won't have access to any of that documentation unless students share it with them in order to set up those accommodations. At college and university, a lot of accommodations are similar to the types of ones that are available in elementary and secondary school. And the goal of those accommodations are to remove any barriers to learning or assessment that exist for students due to their disability. So examples of that would be for students who are blind or have low vision, providing text and braille or giving them text-to-speech or dictation computer programs. For students with slow processing speed due to a learning disability or a mental health disorder, they may have access to a note taker in class, or they may be given extra time on tests and exams. Students with written expression problems may have access to dictation programs or spell check on a computer. And students with physical or mobility challenges, they would ensure that their classrooms are physically accessible, as well as their learning spaces, laboratories, and residence rooms. It's also important to note that there are some accommodations that secondary schools use sometimes that are not available in regular university and college programs. Example of this would be a reader or a scribe. Instead of that, students would have access to technology that would read the text aloud to them, or they would be able to dictate their responses. Similarly, for educational assistants, students sometimes have EAs due to physical disabilities, or some students with autism spectrum disorder or other disabilities. Again, those students likely would not have an educational assistant. They would be required to take care of their own needs in the classroom. Also, sometimes schools modify coursework or alter grades due to missed or failed assignments. Again, this is the type of accommodation that generally does not continue at post-secondary. All students must meet the same academic requirements and the same grade weighting for their courses. In relation to that, we can look at the types of courses that help students along the way when they're preparing for post-secondary. Courses such as academic, applied, college, university, those are courses that help prepare students to meet the academic demands. Courses such as locally developed and workplace generally aren't intended for students who are going on to college or university, and it wouldn't give them the tools and the skills to meet the demands of regular college and university programs. I want to highlight some things that parents can do together with their students to help them prepare for the transition. And I know that Lawrence went over some of these as well, but I'm happy to reiterate for them because they're quite important. And one of these is really helping your child to understand themselves. So we suggest showing your child their IEP, showing them their disability documentation, letting them read through that and really understand what's there, and looking at their strengths and how you can link their strengths and interests with possible career paths, and especially strengths out of school, cooking, gardening, artwork, helping others, those types of skills. We also really encourage parents to talk to their kids about emotional intelligence, and that can be something you can learn about together, because those skills such as resiliency and self-esteem, those are things that are really important for lifelong success, and sometimes even more so than academic intelligence. If there's ways that you can connect through groups like the Learning Disability Association or programs at the school, family members, watching movies that show people with disabilities and them overcoming their struggles and challenges, it can really help students to understand what a path forward might look like for them and to really tackle some of that stigma head on, especially for students that have invisible disabilities, really making them understand how common they are and that there's no shame in that. You can also look at the skills that your child will need at post-secondary, and this is a great thing you can start early at any grade, focusing on learning and studying strategies, time management, buy a big calendar to put over their desk and they can write all their due dates on that, and really practicing those skills before they go off to college and university. In terms of the advocacy, which I know you've already heard about, giving your child opportunities to attend IEP meetings, IPRC meetings, talk to their teacher about their IEP, go over their accommodations, look at when they've done a really good job of convincing you to get a new cell phone or stay up late, and those are advocacy skills that you can build on and take into the academic realm. And really just to support and encourage your child that you believe they can make the transition and be successful at post-secondary school. And it can be really challenging to take that step back. And it can be equally challenging for your child to take the step forward, to take that lead. So really spending the time early to give them chances to lead and giving them chances to stumble and come out stronger, because that's what's helped improve their resiliency, which is a really important skill to take with them. So some questions to get you started with your child: talk about their strengths. If they're having a hard time thinking about them, they can go online and take a multiple intelligence or emotional intelligence quiz to help look at some of their strengths and how those link with different careers. And when they're getting closer to going off to post-secondary, making the connection between the accommodations they use at high school and what those will look like at post-secondary. We really encourage you to go check out the transitionresourceguide.ca to help plan that transition and really get your son or daughter involved in this transition and encourage them to take an active role. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you so much, Alison. Again, anybody have questions? Send the questions to us. We're going to go into our third and final presentation for this session. Stay tuned for the real deal after, and that's where we've interviewed 4 families on their experience on post-secondary education and transitioning. So you'll hear from parent and student perspective. So we have Pietro and Kelsey here from Humber College talking to you about the Community Integration through Cooperative Education Program.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thank you for having us. Like Alison said, we are from Humber College CICE Program, also known as the Community Integration through Cooperative Education Program, and that's what we will be focusing on today. What the program is, the steps to take if you're interested in applying. If you're not within the distance of Humber College, there are other CICE programs within Ontario, but we encourage you to look online and do your research on that. So let's get started. So the CICE program, it's a specialized program for individuals with intellectual disability. It's also formally known as a developmental disability. And this is to give the students with an intellectual ability a college experience. Like I mentioned already, it's to give the students a college experience, and we are not a vocational program. Some of the courses that they will take within the CICE program are listed here, such as personal development, community involvement, and professional skills. And this is in the CICE program, so they'll be taking these classes with other CICE students, and these are to promote their independence and their confidence and so on. Our CIC students are also able to take part in elective courses, and these elective courses are accessed within the Humber community. And some of these courses that our students have taken in previous years are ECE, also known as Early Childhood Education. There are some culinary classes as well as some photography classes, but these are not limited to the options that our students have. We also provide field placements for our students. The first year, they will have field placement on campus. So that could be at Tim Hortons, it could be at the library. And then in their second year, they will have field placement within their community. And that can be at Walmart, like you see here. Again, it could be at Tim Hortons or a community center. As a facilitator, like myself and Pietro, we provide our students with 5 hours of academic support a week per student. This consists of supporting them in their elective class, which I will touch upon, and also providing them with a meeting once a week and a tutorial time to support them, talk about how it's going in the week, if they have any concerns or any goals, and then to work on any assignments or practice for tests that they may have coming up. So here's a list of some of the supports that the facilitators provide in class and out of class. In class, we would encourage our students to introduce themselves, but we'll also support them to introduce themselves to their faculty and the peers. We help the students participate in class if that's group work or presenting. And then we also modify tests and assignments based on their skill and academic level. And for out of class, like I mentioned, we assist them with homework and assignments or studying for tests. We support them to navigate the college community at Humber, and we help students participate in the community if that's being involved in student council, which we have in the CICE program, or going to the gym, whatever their goals are. As for transportation, we do not offer any sort of transportation if it's a school bus or a taxi. The student themselves would have to figure that out if it's a support person or a family member at home driving them to and from, or there's also many buses that come to the Humber. It's TTC, Mississauga Transit, Go Transit, Brampton Transit, any transit you can think of comes to Humber. So I will pass it along to my colleague Pietro Tromba now.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which more and more parents will hear about, students will start hearing about. College students are adults, therefore it's against the law for student information to be shared with parents and support people unless the student gets permission. So very important for parents. It's a transition definitely from high school going into post-secondary. It's the same for our students at CICE. Tuition and financial assistance. This is something that does come up quite often, is how much is it going to cost? So we provided an example for the full year. For example, this year it was $3,837.78. There's the Humber Institutional Bursary, which students can apply for. It does help pay with tuition. Most students on ODSP will qualify for that bursary. Just to note, it's not the same as OSAP. We do get some questions about that. We encourage you to do the research to find out what financial assistance best suits your situation. So again, for the families, you can help your son or daughter do that. In terms of admissions criteria, so just to give you a quick idea of what it looks like for the Humber CSE program. Our criteria is students have to be 19 years or older by the first day of class and have a diagnosis of an intellectual disability. We look for students that graduate from high school with a certificate of achievement or Ontario Secondary School certificate. Admissions process. So this is something for parents. Parents is a great way that you can help your student prepare for this. There are some forms that need to be completed. So the application form, for example, and the documentation that needs to be provided. You can request an application form from CICE at humber.ca, or and send the form and documentation directly to our program. So the application comes directly to us. So definitely, helping out with getting all that underway. Next step, the student will be invited for an interview, and we do look at reference calls as well. So getting the individual prepared for that interview and helping them ensure that they have a reference person that they can go to for that, because we do follow up with reference calls. So helping out with that is very important. The selection process, just to give you a quick idea of what we look at. So the interview team will present each applicant to an external committee. The committee is usually made up of associate deans within Humber and faculty at Humber that has worked with our students in our program before and have that experience. The candidates are ranked based on 5 criteria, one being very important, motivation. So helping your child get that motivation, really wanting to come to college, wanting to learn new things. That's one thing that is key that we look at. And then candidates are placed on a list, either acceptance, wait list, or decline, and the decision is made by April 2nd. And we phone the accepted students. The ideal student, so parents, this is very important. You can help your son or daughter get prepared by, looking at being motivated to learn and come to college, willing to try new things and ask questions, not being afraid to ask those questions, even if it's, they may ask twice or 3 times, not to worry about that. It shows us that they want to learn. Independent and wanting to try things on their own. They will be, on their own. They're going to be independent adults at the college. So really working on that and helping them really become self-advocates. It's all about self-advocacy, especially in our program in CICE. The students really becoming the #1 person knowing about what they want to learn about. So definitely becoming a strong self-advocate. Important dates for families to keep in mind. The application deadline, so February 1st. Each year it's February 1st. So really ensuring that you stay on top of that to make sure you don't miss the deadline. Interviews will be offered between October and February. So usually, we might do that through email, where the family or the student would provide an email that we can get in contact with, or a phone number, and the acceptance usually around the beginning of April. So for this coming year, we're looking at April 2nd. Some tips, tools, and resources. So to becoming actively involved in community and being a self-advocate. So really parents, encourage your son, your daughter to be involved in as much as possible, even if it's, volunteering or maybe playing a sport. Doesn't necessarily have to be, a work experience, for example, in the community. Being a self-advocate, so really teaching them how to ask things for themselves, how to, if they're wanting to try something out, what they need to do to do that. Transportation, like Kelsey mentioned, having that discussion of how they would get to the college, so helping them with the transit training. Definitely that, that's very important. They might want to look at practicing the training and how to get to, Humber, for example, in our case, and building a portfolio. So a portfolio is very important. Having things like a resume, some of the work they've done, just something that talks to everyone about themselves. So helping them build that together, that's a great tool. And resources for our program, attending Humber's CICE Information Night and the Open House, and getting involved with Developmental Services Ontario. Discussion starter questions that we thought of. What do you, the student, want to do after high school? And why do you, the student, want to come to college? So parents, having that discussion with your son or daughter is a great way to get that started, to see if the CICE program is the right program for them. And our contact information is provided here. Again, the email is a really good way to contact us, cic@humber.ca. And that's it. At this point, I will pass it back to Alison. Thank you very much, everyone.
So Pietro, Kelly, and Ali, Lawrence, and Alison, want to thank you so much. I'm going to unmute you all here, if you don't mind. I want to thank you so much for being part of this presentation as well, too. And to be honest, when we were putting this presentation together, I just realized there's just so much information out there. And it's on the rise, where students are having more challenges, families have more challenges, and we need to find a way to get those resources to you. And so I can tell you at Let's Get Together, we want to be able to work with all your organizations to find ways to get your important and valuable resources into the community, because you're all doing such amazing work.